Hello and welcome to this evening's Meet the Women of F1 session, brought to you by FIA Girls on Track UK, who are managed by Motorsport UK and Formula One. Now, this is actually our last week of this series, so I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that's been involved in this, to Girls on Track UK, Motorsport, all of our speakers, and of course to you guys at home for putting on this brilliant session and for joining us. I am Ariana Bravo, and I hope you're doing well today. I hope the start of your week is going well. And I'm going to be your host for this evening. I currently co-host the Driven by Diversity podcast, and you can find that on all of the usual streaming platforms. And I am very excited to speak to today's guests, as you can probably imagine. But a bit about why we're here, first of all. So as you may already know, Formula One are on a mission to improve their diversity and inclusion. And they thought that these sessions would be a brilliant way to shine the spotlight on some of the incredible women working within F1. And who better to partner up with than FIA Girls on Track UK, who have a track record of inspiring and getting the next generation into motorsport. Now, as a heads up, these sessions are all being recorded and they will be posted on the FIA Girls on Track UK Facebook page. So if you go and join, you'll be able to catch up on any of the ones that you might miss. And you'll also be joining an ever-growing community of like-minded individuals. So I recommend that after this session, you head over to Facebook and join. Now, you will all be muted this evening, and that is just so that we can hear our guests clearly. But of course, these sessions are for your benefit, and we want you to feel as involved as possible. So please use the chat function, send in your questions through the evening, and I'll try to get through as many of them as possible. I do ask that when you send your questions, please send them to everyone and not direct messages, as we want everyone to feel involved, and I might miss them if you direct message me. But to kick things off, please head over to the chat as we have done before. I can see some people doing it already. Tell us where you're joining us from. And we will have, we've got Colorado, we've got Switzerland. Look, there's people from all over here, which I absolutely love. Now, the last point is that when the conversation gets underway, I do recommend that you switch to speaker view. And you can do that by just hitting it in the top right corner and changing it. And that way you'll get the best viewing experience for today's session. Now, housekeeping is out of the way, so let's bring our guests in. Today, we are joined by Amy Overy, who is a TV producer for the digital team. And we are also joined by Wendy Hendrickx, who is the head of TV production. How are you both today? Wendy, how are you doing, first of all?
I'm good. Thank you very much, Ariana. And thank you, everybody, for joining.
And Amy, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really well. Thank you, Ariana. Thanks for having me.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours. So, Amy, let's start with you. As TV producer for the digital team, you are actually part of the team that travels to races. But can you tell us a bit more about what your role actually involves over a race weekend?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm a producer for the digital team. So that's basically making content for all of the F1 digital channels. So that's YouTube, that's Instagram, for F1.com as well. Being a producer basically means that you make sure that everybody is where they should be, with everything they need, on time, with all of the right equipment, and that everybody involved is organised and that you're ready to go to do the shoot that you've set up to do. So that includes talking to the teams, making sure they're happy, sometimes briefing the drivers if that's required as well. And like I said, just making sure logistics are all in place so that when you turn up, you have everything you need and you're not running off to go and get lights or camera batteries or whatever.
Sounds like a lot of responsibility, but a lot of fun as well. And I'm sure a lot of people on the call today are familiar with some of the content that you help produce. I'm sure they've seen it over the digital channels. Wendy, just to jump over to you, head of TV production, can you tell us about what your role is?
Yes, absolutely. I'm head of TV production, so I'm responsible for the live production team. We make all the live content for Formula One, which is as a main product, the international feed. But we also make pit lane channel, for example, pre and post race show, weekend debrief show. So a lot of content goes also to the digital side. And I am actually responsible for the day-to-day management of the team, which is 25 people of staff, and it grows until a staggering 85 people over a race weekend.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. You mentioned the international feed there, and some people on the call may not actually be familiar exactly with what the international feed is. So can you explain a little bit more about what the IF is?
Yeah, absolutely. That is basically all the pictures that you receive at home, wherever you are in the world. That is what we produce. So it's all the cameras, all the cameramen, all the equipment, all the graphics that you see on the screen. Everything is produced both on site, and now also a big part of the production happens in Biggin Hill, South London, and as a complete package, this is going over satellite or over fiber, and it's this way we distribute it all over the world, basically. Then the individual broadcasters, which are the right holders of Formula One, they just receive it and they put it in their Formula One shows or packages, and that's basically how you receive it at home and how you see it at home.
There you have it, guys. If you weren't clear, there's your explanation. Amy, we've actually just had a message come in from Joanna saying that they love your cooking adventures on Instagram, which has made me laugh, because if anyone follows Amy, you'll know that she looks like she's an amazing baker, and her stories will always have you absolutely drooling. But back to the conversation. Amy, you actually have a really long history with F1, as you first joined the company back in 1999. Can you tell us how you initially found your way into Formula One?
Yeah, sure. So I did media production at university. I did a HND, which is very hands-on, very practical, learning the basics of kind of all media production, sort of video, radio, sort of, producing for TV, that kind of thing. But prior to that, I'd done work experience for 2 weeks at my local radio station where I grew up in Coventry. And before that, I didn't really have an interest in sort of broadcast media at all. But as soon as I did the work experience, I was hooked, and that's what led me to the university course in Salford, which I really, really loved, as I said, because it was really hands-on. When I graduated, I moved back home for a little while, not really sure what I was going to do, and ended up being offered a job back at the local radio station on the breakfast show, which was really good fun. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I moved down to London to work at another radio station, Kiss FM, which is very different. But I've always loved sport, and so I did actually a little bit of moonlighting on the side for another radio station. I did a bit of, believe it or not, football co-commentary for all of Fulham home games. I was terrible, by the way. I was absolutely dreadful, but it was really, really good fun and great experience. And then at around the same time, a friend of mine said that he'd spotted a job advertised in the back of Autosport magazine, which I never bought. I'd only really become interested in Formula One sort of a few years previously as a spectator, so it wasn't really on my radar. And it was for a television production assistant, and he said, "Oh, I think you'd be really good at that." And because I'd been doing a bit of the sports side of things with radio, it sort of gave me the confidence to apply for it. And excuse me, no one was more surprised than I was when I got an interview, and then 3 weeks later was actually at Silverstone for my very first race in July 1999. So a very, very long time ago, but that was kind of my route in, basically.
Interesting. So it seems like you always sort of knew that this path was what you'd be interested in, and good on you for getting in there. Wendy, you also have always wanted to be a TV producer. Can you tell us about your path in? Was it similar to Amy's, or did you follow a different sort of route?
Yeah, I think it was different, but when I was a kid, I really wanted to be a TV director. I always wanted to be doing something with television, because that's, when I was a kid, how I explained to my mom and dad. So I went to Brussels, where I started. So I'm from Belgium, by the way. I went to Brussels, where I started my studies in audiovisual communication, and I specialized in TV directing. After my studies, I went away to Switzerland for a year to just do some skiing and some other nice stuff. And I got a job offer from a Belgian company. And funny enough, it was in sports. And I always had an interest in sports when I was a kid. Every sport, also Formula One. But and I just thought then, like, all right, let's give it a go. During my studies, to be honest, for example, when I was looking for an internship, all the boys that were in my group, they all went to all the sports broadcasters for their internships. There was hardly nothing left for anyone else. I did mine in the Philharmonic Orchestra, which is a completely different route. But anyways, my first job offer was in sports as a scheduler. I came back from Switzerland because I had been away. Actually, my mom ran over all the latest newspapers with all the football scores and who was a champion in which country, etc., etc. And I just nailed the interview. And then a few weeks later, I started my job in sports as a scheduler. It was really, really interesting, but I wanted to have a bit more things going on. So while I was doing my day job within the same company, I started to do some directing during the nights because when you're in Europe, NBA basketball was quite a big sport here. Yeah. During the nights, that was for me the first steps into a little bit of directing and getting the feel of that. And after 1 year, a company in the Netherlands found out about me, and they thought like, hey, that's might be interesting to bring her with us to the Netherlands. And I just took the opportunity, really. Told my parents, yeah, I got a new job offer. Sorry, it's in the Netherlands. I really got to go there. So I did that. I promised them when I'm a TV director in many, many, many years from now, I'll come back to Belgium. I became a TV director, but I never went back to Belgium. I just stayed in the Netherlands. So worked for 24 years in the Netherlands. I went from a broadcaster, director to a production company. There I was directing shows. It was always in sports. I've never been in anything else. But I did lots of sports, like big sports, small sports, didn't really matter. I loved it. I had been throughout my career in the slipstream of Formula One from time to time. I worked for Canal Plus. We were rights holders. So back then I was involved in Formula One. Then later on, I worked for Veronica in the Netherlands. They were rights holders for Formula One. So I was involved as well, and so on and so on. And I was executive producer at Ziggo Sports in the Netherlands for quite a few years. And then last year, January, I made the jump overseas and I joined Formula One.
Very interesting. It's great that you've had experience across so many different sports. That's a really nice insight, I imagine, to how it works across the different sports. We've had a question from Holly, who has asked, how would you recommend someone trying to get into the media gets involved within the sport? Is university the best route? Amy, I want to go to you first, as I know that you came into F1, but you've actually had various roles since you joined before becoming a producer. You've had roles in front of the camera and behind. So what advice would you give to Holly? And would you say that university is necessary?
From a personal point of view, my university course was very, very useful because it was, like I say, a very hands-on, very practical course. From sort of day one, we were handed a camera and told to kind of figure out how to use it and go and shoot something and edit and that sort of thing. So from my own personal experience, yes, something like that, and that is always very useful because you get a grounding in sort of all the technology. I guess it depends what it is that you want to do. Obviously, I work sort of with cameramen, with audio engineers, that kind of thing. So it just sort of helped have a slight understanding of what's going on. But I didn't pursue any of those roles. My roles were much more sort of creative and organising, that sort of thing. So you could, as I did, get some work experience in local media organisations. You work for free, basically. I think I got paid in CDs. when I used to help them out in my holidays and that sort of thing. But it stood me in really good stead because I showed an interest, and so they would teach me various things. So I learned how to, I mean, God, it's all digital now, obviously, but back then, sort of splicing tape together and that sort of thing when sort of editing interviews. So I felt that I had a really good sort of grounding because it was a small radio station. You basically got to do everything as well. So you got to do a little bit of presenting, you got to do a bit of interviewing, a bit of editing, that sort of thing. So I think if you can get in somewhere like that and just sort of show sort of, you know, willingness to sort of learn everything, you might just find the kind of path that you want to take into Formula One. Like I said, I joined as what was a TV production assistant, and my first job was doing replays. So obviously when there's an accident or an incident, you see you know, the replay sort of shortly afterwards, and you're monitoring 6 cameras at a time, and you're sort of doing this across 2 screens, and if the incident happens to happen on one of your cameras, you have to queue it up and then play it out when the director says so. And quite famously or infamously, my very first replay and my very first race at Silverstone went out backwards because I panicked and I was so nervous that I hit the wrong button and it went out backwards. And there are still people in the company that know me from then, and I have never quite lived it down. And I think it was decided quite early on that maybe that wasn't my strong point. So, and I was much better with people. And I was very lucky. I joined Formula One at a time when the production department was actually very, very small. And you were sort of afforded the opportunity to show an interest in something and actually be able to go and do it. And so at one time I said I'd quite like to have a go at interviewing in the pit lane, and my then boss said, okay, at Monaco, and I went, oh, okay. So it was good. It meant I got to have a go at many different sort of disciplines within, you know, the company, so that was really useful for me, I think. So if you can find perhaps a company where you can have a go at everything, then I think that would stand you in quite good stead for the future.
That's good advice. They're getting stuck in with all the different bits as well, so you can work out what is actually right for you, because sometimes you think that a certain role will be perfect for you, but then you find that something else actually fits much better. Wendy, we'll go on to you now as well. Similar sort of question. So I know that when we've spoken off air, we've discussed before the fact that, you know, often we have people that love F1, they love the sport, but obviously to be good at your job, it needs to be more than that. And primarily you need to be good at and love the role that you're doing. And then obviously a love for the sport or a passion for the sport is a great bonus. But what advice would you give to help people stand out? So we've had a question from Wendy, from somebody else called Wendy from the Netherlands. And they've said, do you have any advice on how you can stand out from others while applying for a job? So what sort of things would you look for in someone that you think could be a potential producer?
Well, I think it's important, first of all, be yourself all the time, every time. It doesn't matter. People think different things, doesn't matter, just be yourself. Then I also think try a lot of things. Just like Amy just said, don't aim for the highest mountain at the beginning of your career. It's okay if you do it step by step. I made a change last year. I was 47. I really look good. No. But, you know, it is never too late to make a step where you want to be. Don't forget, once you're in Formula One is, you love Formula One. That means that you don't get to sit down with your friends and watch a normal race anymore, because you will be working all the time. And that's okay. It's okay to start in a different field, for example. But I think as long as you're passionate about what you do, if you love what you do, that's okay. And that makes it different, because you will show, and it will give you confidence, and your confidence is what brings you to the next level. That's how I feel it. And that's how it went for me, basically.
I think that's good advice there. Confidence is so key. And I know that you told me off air as well that the jobs that you've applied for, you've always had so much confidence that you are the right candidate for it. And you've really helped that drive you forward and not make you doubt yourself. And ultimately you were obviously right, because you got the roles. So it just goes to show. Now, Amy, as I mentioned at the start, you travel. Well, I know, Wendy, you do as well, but Amy, you always travel to the majority of the races, not all of them. But what sort of challenges do you find attached to that? Because of course, lots of people look at F1 and they think it's super glamorous, fast cars, traveling around the world, all looks great. But the realities of it are, obviously there are challenges. It's still a job at the end of the day. And I know that you're a mum as well. And we've had someone, Catalina has asked, is it difficult to combine family and work? So sort of linking those two questions, what are some of the challenges of your role, and is it difficult to combine them? Maybe those are the challenges, I don't know.
No, it is a challenge. Yeah, it's it definitely is a challenge. I took a break. I used to be full-time for Formula One. I'm now freelance, so I don't do all of the races, which helps because it's unsustainable for me and my family. I think this year I'm doing 17 or 18 races, so it's still the vast majority of them. My son is nearly 13, but I've been traveling again since he was 3, and so it's all he's ever known. So in a way that makes it a bit easier, but it's slightly harder now, I think, being away because he's so much more aware. And when he's 3, he doesn't know whether 3 days is 3 weeks is 3 years. If I'm away, it's just like, oh, where's mummy? But now I think it's a little bit harder. He's much more aware. It is a challenge. I've got a very understanding husband, and when my son was younger, I had an incredible army of friends who would just have him after school, pick him up, have him for tea and play dates and that kind of thing. And I've got family around here as well, so that's all good. Going back to traveling, traveling is great. It's one of the the perks of the job, but it's not always brilliant. It's when you've just done a 22-hour flight to Australia and you arrive at 10 p.m. and you're expected to be at the track for 9 a.m. the next morning, and you don't know if you're coming or going, and you're jet lagged and homesick, and then you're trying to figure out what the time difference is as to when you can phone home and actually speak to your family and that sort of thing. Obviously you're concentrating on the work that you're there to do, but there are all these other factors there. You can't completely separate yourself. People think that traveling, well, you just sit there on a plane, but actually traveling is really tiring because you very rarely just get on the plane. There's the hours that you spend getting up, getting to the airport, the few hours between, and depending on where we are in the country that we land in, our hotel could be miles away, it could be a couple of hours away. So it's quite tiring. It's probably the main thing that I would say. And obviously jet lag's horrible. Jet lag makes you do crazy things, and it's not great. You almost are on the back foot when you arrive, and it's quite hard. And just as you're starting to feel normal, of course, you then fly home again. So obviously Europe is totally fine, but anywhere longer than that is sometimes can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine it takes some adjustment to do. I bet when you first start traveling with F1, you're completely thrown off probably for months. Yeah. The swing of it must just feel completely crazy.
It takes me about 10 days to get over doing Melbourne, at least.
Oh my God, I can imagine.
Yeah, it really does. I'm broken usually after that one.
Yeah. Wendy, coming to you about some of the challenges, we've had a question from Sarah, and she's asked, how do you deal with technical difficulties on live TV, for example, when there are crashes in a race that cannot be shown or other things like that? Now, I know that I visited MNTC, the Media and Technology Centre in Biggin Hill, which is when we first met, when I was very kindly invited to spend the weekend with you and the team. And it is an incredible system that you guys have going on there. It's really mind-blowing and super fascinating. But how do you deal with things like that? It's still live TV at the end of the day. What do you do when something doesn't go to plan?
Yeah, well, this is the good thing about live TV and the bad thing at the same time. It's a blessing and a curse. Mm-hmm. The good thing about it, if something's happening, or if something's happened, you really have to set aside all the difficulties and just carry on, because the race carries on, or whatever happens at the track carries on.
Yeah.
So that's the good thing. We have some procedures in place, some things that we need to follow. We have to follow certain rules. Sometimes there are some sensitivities that we have to take into account as well. And we really have to think about safety as well. Safety is a very, very, very big impact. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. And then after every session, my team gathers again. We talk things through. In the morning before every session, we are these days we're on a call. And also because my team is now split into two pieces between what's happening at the track and what's happening in Biggin Hill. So we do it like we do it now on a Zoom call or a Teams call, but we always get together and discuss the issues as a team from an editorial perspective, because that's what we are doing. Mm-hmm. Formula One is a much bigger thing than just the broadcast. There is timing, for example. The timing guys are amazing. If the timing guys are not there, there is no race happening. All the technical facilities, all the freight, the building of the broadcast center at the track, we call that now Event Technical Center, the remote technical center that we have in Biggin Hill. It is such a big operation. So from pure technical perspective, we have an end of day meeting as well. It goes across the board, and it is mainly directors and head of departments, some of the team leaders as well that join that meeting. Every little thing that happens, it's just logged onto a system, and we talk about it, and we just ask ourselves every day, how can we do things better? What could have we done to avoid this? And what are we going to do next time when it happens again? Mm-hmm. And this is how we try to improve ourselves and just be better at what we do every day.
That's really good. And I guess because of the fact that obviously we have the race weekend and they're pretty much every other week, or during COVID times, sometimes literally every week, it means that you can put those things into action quite quickly and see whether they work, see whether they don't work, and then change it as necessary or can continue to do it. We've had another interesting question from someone called Alex, and this is for both of you. And it's, what would you say the differences and challenges are between producing/directing live broadcast content compared to digital content? So Amy, do you want to start with that one? Because obviously you're in the digital side of things.
Yeah, and I do actually work across both. I do help out on the international feed as well, with a bit of floor managing and other bits and pieces as well. So I do have a little bit of experience. When it's live, you have to think on your feet. Well, actually, when it's digital as well, you have to think on your feet because things can still go wrong. Obviously, with something that's digital and it's a shoot that's going to be edited, you can make mistakes or something could go wrong and you can redo it. So that's not so much of a problem. I imagine Wendy would say, obviously, when it's live, you just have to paddle faster and try and come up with a solution. So we're kind of afforded the luxury, really, doing digital because they're sort of pre-planned shoots. And whilst things can go wrong, or you might have to change things for whatever reason, generally it's not as critical at the time. It's certainly not time critical. You might have a certain amount of time with a team or a driver, but usually you can get it done, and it can all be sorted out in the edit. We all say it can all be sorted out in the edit. It's fine.
That's what we say on our podcast as well. It's fine. Everything's
also done the edit
to make it look like nothing happened.
Luckily, we have amazing editors, so it's all good.
Yeah, they saved the day, right? We've had a couple of questions coming in. One from somebody called Candice, and also a question from Joanna, basically asking what the most interesting part of your jobs are, or what you enjoy the most or find the most rewarding. Wendy, I'm going to go to you first. What would you say? I can see you thinking about it, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
That's a difficult question, because there are so many things in what I do that is rewarding, because I just love what I do. I think for me, the best thing to see happening for my team, basically, and for the company, but first of all for my team, is when things just come together as planned. I think, and with that, the team effort. If a plan comes together, that is amazing. And do things as a team, achieve things as a team. It's actually the best reward there is. I like to see people come upstairs in the broadcast center in Biggin Hill, for example, with a smile on their face, or just come and see me and tell me, oh, have you seen this? I made this and this video. Have you seen it? Oh, I'm so proud of that. And I think for me, it's really, really important to make sure that everyone who works in TV production is able to be the best version of themselves and to be proud of what they do. I think that is, for me, my most rewarding aspect of the whole job.
That's a nice one. I like that. Amy,
I was going to say, I'd agree with Wendy, because the same when we're producing content, when you've got an idea in your head and you've sort of envisaged how it's going to work, and then the shoot goes well, or perhaps it doesn't go quite so well, you're never quite sure, but you've planned it all and you've done all the groundwork and you've done all the liaising with the teams and you're there and it's all going on, and then you finally see that piece when it goes out on f1.com or whatever, and it kind of fulfills your vision and it's all been done brilliantly, and you just go, oh, that's amazing, I'm really pleased. And you do, like when I said, it's really rewarding when you kind of see the finished product. And I think the other rewarding thing, I think, is being part of the sport. We're not just a TV company, obviously we are Formula One, and when you're away at a race and you're heavily involved, you do feel like you're part of the sport, and that for me is quite rewarding, because you get to meet so many people from all over the world, from teams and other broadcasters, photographers, you name it, and it's just, I love meeting people, I love traveling, so I like that side of it. I like getting to know people from all over the world.
And I'm sure they love you as well, because I've seen that you sometimes distribute your baked goods at events. So there's a good way to make friends, everyone. We've had a similar question from both Izzy and Katie. What's one thing you wish you knew before starting out? Obviously, you've both had vast experience across Formula One, across different sports, but what's the one thing that, looking back, you're like, oh, I wish I'd known that before I started out, or in hindsight, that would have really helped me in my journey to where I am now?
That it's not glamorous.
And there we have it, everyone.
No, I joke. It's hard work. I know that it's hard work, and it's long hours. And I wish I'd known the effect that jet lag can have on you when you're trying to work. Wendy, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. It's a thin line between what is your work and what is your passion and what is your day off. Yeah. I think a lot of people struggle with this, especially in these times, but also if you love what you do, it helps. It's a massive help. But yeah, again, when I'm traveling, I'm not flying, having my headphones on my ears and watch a movie. Yeah? I'm with my computer and I'm already doing my emails, read my emails, prepare my emails, and make sure they are sent off once I'm off the plane, for example. There is not really a break. You have to be very strict with yourself. And I'm not so strict with myself most of the time. So that is a really, really, fine line, and it just goes in between your personal life. I think it's a certain lifestyle that you just
it's difficult to have.
Yeah,
I can imagine that, as you said, especially if it's something that you're passionate about, because you want to spend your time invested in it and you're enjoying it, but at the same time it is still work, and you'll burn out if you don't have that complete switch off time from work/passion. We've had a question from Eka, who's asked, with the pandemic, how different was it compared to a typical race season? Did you do more remote things with your teams, and was it hard to adjust in such a short amount of time? I'm sure that you guys both have answers for this. So Amy, you go first.
Well, obviously we flew to Australia back in March last year, and came home 4 days later once the race was cancelled. So that was obviously the start of it. And then, of course, none of us knew when we'd be travelling again. So actually, when we arrived in Austria in July, none of us really knew what to expect. It was the complete unknown. Obviously, there was lots of COVID testing ahead of time and at the track, and there were protocols in place, but we didn't really know how this was going to affect our output. And it was really odd. I have to say, it was really, really odd. The very first time that we did the TV pen, because one of our jobs in digital is we speak to every single driver on a Thursday after the press conference. And then that gets turned into quotes for Paddock Pass, one of our shows. And to be the sort of 2 meters away with a mic on a stand. So normally, you would paddle a mic, our presenter would, ask the question. And of course, with sort of hygiene and that sort of thing, there were lots of sort of logistical changes where we had to have a mic on a stand in front of the driver, and it all had to be sanitized. And then our presenter would have his own mic. And at first we thought that only the presenter would have to wear a mask, and then it became apparent that all the drivers were wearing masks as well. So it was quite hard to, you're used to reading facial expressions, and all you could go on is the eyes. And if one of the drivers was wearing sunglasses, you didn't even have that to go on. So Kimi Räikkönen was fairly inscrutable. We couldn't really work out what he was saying at all, or what he was feeling, although we could guess. And so just kind of those logistical challenges were quite hard. And we did actually split some of our output for the post-race show, particularly back to Biggin Hill with Wendy and her team, because we weren't sure if we were going to get any guests on the shows. Obviously, we couldn't sort of film in motorhomes anymore, or even just on the terraces of motorhomes. So a lot of our sort of content changed. We couldn't have such close contact with the teams and the drivers, which meant that we had to be sort of, fairly adaptable. And we just weren't able to make the sort of features that we normally would during their season. So that was different. But I know, obviously, Wendy, heading up the remote production back at Biggin Hill, you had lots of challenges as well, didn't you?
Yes, absolutely. It was a massive change. And to be honest, for me, it's a funny thing to say, but for me, it's normal. I started in 2020 with Formula One. Although I was with a broadcaster before, so I know what a normal Formula One season for a broadcaster is and looks like, planning, because we also had a team at the track, etc., etc. But being at Formula One, and then all of a sudden this happens, it was very, very strange. First of all, I was in a very steep learning curve.
Yeah.
But then I needed to change everything, and I needed to learn completely different things about, normally, for example, budgets. I would do budgets in October, but not in April or in March, which we ended up doing. We had the bit of the emergency state we were in, the company was in, the sport was in. So we needed to mitigate that first. Then we needed to start working on a new calendar. And then in the meantime, my team, together with every team in Formula One, basically needed to look at a remote production option. And that remote production, we already had that in mind to do that in 2022 or 2023. That was on the roadmap of Formula One, to go down that road for example, sustainability. But then we had to do it in about 8 weeks. So that was a massive, massive undertaking. And then, to be honest, for me, when I saw the first cameras coming back from Austria, when I was down in Biggin Hill in the remote technical center, that was such a relief. And we did have a lot of difficulties, needed to bring down the amount of cameras that we could have. So it really did affect, for us, it really did affect the product. But along the way, we tried to improve it again and do better. In the last 5 weeks leading up to the first race in Austria, I also built a studio in Biggin Hill. Formula One didn't have their own studio. So from scratch, in a meeting room, we built a studio, and that studio is now used for a lot of our products, and also what Amy just said, post-race show, pre-race show, tech talk, all those products that go out on F1 TV, Jolyon Palmer analysis and weekend debrief after the race weekend. Also, everything is now recorded in our studio. So it was within.
Sounds like you literally had to reconsider everything, basically.
Everything, yeah. And while, for example, my team, most of my team was traveling. Now I think it's 50-50, more or less. So 50% is traveling. The other 50% is still working in Biggin Hill. For those people, the world has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
Because instead of driving their car to an airport and flying out to wherever and stay there for 4 or 5 days, they now have to drive into Biggin Hill daily.
Yeah.
Work on very awkward hours. It's also a sort of jet lag they have.
Yeah.
So it is very, very difficult for everyone.
But you've managed it, and hats off to all of you for doing it, because that must be such a big shock to a sport like F1, which, as we've said, is a global sport. It's all about traveling around and catching the action at the track. So really, really big accomplishment of you guys to actually manage to continue producing the content that you have. You touched on the fact that, of course, you do interviews, and you have the presenters who will interview the drivers, and you'll speak to drivers after the media conference on Thursdays, etc. We've had a question from Candice, who has asked, considering you work closely with presenters, what would you say makes a great sports presenter? And I will start taking notes now.
I'm just thinking of the presenters that I work with and that I've worked with. Knowing what you're talking about is key, obviously. I work with both Will Buxton and Lawrence Barretto, who are both incredibly knowledgeable about Formula One and historically as well. Will has got a really, really encyclopedic knowledge of Formula One going way, way, way back. So that's always useful to have, because you know that they know their stuff, so you can kind of rely on them. They might want to do a little bit of fact checking, which is absolutely fine when it comes to stats. They want to make sure they get the right number of races that person has won or whatever before they start an interview. And just, again, the ability to think on your feet, because you have to be able to react to what a driver is telling you. So you might have some pre-planned questions in your head, but then if the driver goes off on a completely different tangent, there's no point pursuing those other questions that you had. If you just ignore them, it just looks really odd. So just being able to react and to be quite natural and personable, I guess, as well. Be somebody that people want to listen to and to watch is probably key. So, be natural, be yourself. Like going back to what Wendy said, just be yourself. F1 is, people in F1 can spot fakery a mile off. So, and the sport is built on relationships mainly. And if you're not yourself, you will get found out very, very quickly, and it's not sustainable, believe me. So if you, and being a sports presenter, if you're yourself and fairly personable, I think, and can get on with everybody, then you've got a pretty good chance.
Wendy, what would you say? Would you echo what Amy said?
Nothing to add. No, nothing to add.
To add.
No, perfectly said. I can't say it better than Amy.
There you have it, Candice. There is your answer, your perfect answer from Amy. We've had a question which is quite interesting, something I wanted to ask you guys actually. So during the off season, how do your roles change? Because obviously you're not at the track, you've not got those interviews like we've just spoken about with the drivers, you're not catching drivers after sessions. Amy, I know that you are freelance technically, so I don't know whether that changes things as well during the off season.
I basically have a lovely long break. So it would be completely the opposite to Wendy. My life at home is very different to my life at track, and I relished the opportunity over the winter to just kind of kick back a bit and reacquaint myself with my family, who seem like nice people. So that's good. So yeah, occasionally I might be asked to do the odd thing or go in for meetings, but it's quite rare, really. It's all just starting to build up now as we get ready for sort of Bahrain pre-season testing, and then of course the season. So I've got meetings, I've got emails and things that I do, but generally my time at home, if I choose it to be and I don't take other work, is my own. But I know that Wendy is in full-on planning stage for the next season, so she won't take kindly to me saying that I just sit around eating biscuits all day. So
yeah, Wendy, tell us what you're doing then.
Yeah, I'm not on a break. I had a lovely break over the Christmas time, which was good. Company closes as well, which is amazing, because otherwise the emails just pop in Now it is really contained, but then first week of January it kicks off again. We are actually planning the season already, and planning the we call it race 00, which is the testing in Bahrain, coming up on the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th of March. There's a lot of things that we need to prepare for that testing. It's not only Formula 1, it's also Formula 2 testing. So over the season or in the break, the equipment comes back. I have, for example, a cameraman checking the equipment, servicing the equipment. At the moment, we are we are starting to pack everything up. First shipments will go out at the end of this. Let me see. Yeah, in about 6 days, shipments will go out to Bahrain. So everything needs to be packed and ready. My team is also working on the hero shoots, for example, with the drivers. We are working on a new opening sequence for the season. There's a lot of things going on. We're doing some commercial shoots for teams, because while we are there, the cars are at the track for the first time, etc., etc. So also teams are looking for specific footage for them. And it's just about planning, making sure that we have a cameraman, that we have helicopter, that we have a camcat system. We're talking about minimum 23 to 29 maximum track cameras, for example, which means for every camera position, there's a cameraman. Sometimes if we're having a crane there, it's 2 or 3 people. Camcat, that's the system that runs along at a high speed, runs along the pit lane, for example. That's 2 people. Everything needs to be built as well. Scaffolding needs to happen. It's quite a lot. So we need to order cranes also for the track. If we are on a 40-meter high crane, everything needs to be ordered locally. So that is basically what we are currently working on. In the meantime, we do new contracts with people we work with, and basically crew up all the shows that we are working and make sure that we have people to produce everything. So it's full on. 12-hour days is not something strange in my world. Lots of meetings, back-to-back meetings. No time for lunch or whatsoever. Quick coffee in between, and then carry on with the next thing, and then speak to my team. I speak to my team every day.
I can see Amy chuckling here, and I feel like maybe she's realizing how much she just rubbed it in that she.
Wendy's not my friend anymore. No. It's funny. You always think it's a really long winter break, and you know, and I think that I'm getting on a plane in 2 weeks' time to go to Bahrain for pre-season testing, and then obviously the race is 2 weeks after that. It feels like it's evaporated. So I know that for Wendy, it must feel like you just never stop, and you're just always planning for the next season. It's constant, basically, and the season's so much longer now. When I started, it used to run from March till October. And now obviously we're running right into December, so that period at home, or you know, the winter break as they call it, which of course, as Wendy's just explained, is not a break for most people at F1. It gets shorter, which means you have to work harder to get everything done, to get it all out and ready and in good shape. Ready for the season to start again.
The funny thing is, I think we have like an 88-day winter break now, more or less, which is, I think, the longest since years, or maybe ever. It doesn't feel, to me, it doesn't feel like that at all. It's just full on. The train has left the station, hop, we jump on it, and we just ride along. And then it always feels like in these kind of weeks, the stress is building up. Not with me alone, it's for everybody. You always feel like you're going to be like 3 days short.
Yeah,
you don't have enough time to produce everything, to make sure everything is in place, and then in the end it is all good.
It's a pretty well-oiled machine.
Everything.
I've realized that over the years, it just all comes together at the last minute.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad that all the stress over the break pays off, and I'm glad that Amy, you can come into everything where it's meant to where it's meant to be after your relaxation.
That's why I take biscuits, because I feel guilty.
Yeah, it all makes sense now.
Exactly.
So of course, these sessions, guys, are to promote diversity and inclusion within F1 and to speak to some lovely ladies working within the sport. And you'll probably know, anyone that's tuned into the other sessions, that we have been asking about your experiences working within F1, because it is typically a male-dominated sport. And we have lots of lovely ladies and men on the call, but this is Girls on Track UK initiative. So what has your experience been within the sport? Amy, you've obviously worked in F1 since 1999, so you must have seen quite a lot of change over the time. Is that true? Do you feel like there's been a lot of improvement on this front? And what's your experience been as well, considering you're a mum as well? I know that this is something that we spoke about, and the fact that you often find it strange that you get asked all the time how you cope with traveling, but your male counterparts don't. But talk to us a bit more about that.
Well, it's definitely improved in the 22 years since I started in Formula One. When I started, I was the first full-time female member of production. Like I said, it was a really, really small team. So I was quite surprised, but then not so surprised when I saw the rest of F1 and the sort of gender makeup. It's massively improved. And, you know, obviously there are women in absolutely every area of the sport now, and not just within our company in every department. So that is great. I will tell you one funny story though, that when I was pit lane reporter, I worked alongside a male pit lane reporter who'd been doing it for a while. So he had his nose a little bit pushed out of joint, I think, that I was being given a chance in the pit lane. And I always remember we were in Monaco, my first race. It was live. I was terrified. I was so nervous. I threw up before the first session. I was so scared. And he just whispered in my ear. He said, "All right, love," he said, "you stick to the GMTV stuff and leave the serious bits to me." And I remember thinking,
oh my
goodness. Thankfully, things have changed massively since then. And I can honestly say that that's probably my only real sort of overt experience of sort of sexism. And I remained the pit lane reporter until I left to get married and have my child. So I feel that I probably proved myself, and I'm still doing the job. So hopefully, I think sort of gender wise, I think as long as you're good at your job, then it doesn't matter what gender you are, and that you will kind of gain the respect accordingly. And yeah, I do find it odd that I always get asked if I miss my son, and yet all of the cameramen and engineers who have children never get asked if they miss their children. Like, it can only be a mum thing, that you only miss your children if you're female and actually gave birth to them. So which is nonsense. Yeah, of course I miss it, but also I'm professional and I'm there to do a job, and so I can sort of compartmentalize what it is that I'm doing, and then when I go home, I'm home, and I'm completely home, and I'm mum, and kind of get on with it basically. So but yeah, things have definitely improved, and I think they will continue to do so for quite some time.
I hope so too. The cheek of that other pit lane reporter, God, absolute audacity of him. Wendy, what's your experience been like? What are your thoughts on the diversity front in Formula One?
Well, yeah, to be honest, I had one funny thing happen to me in last year in Italy. I was driving from the hotel with a colleague, and when I arrived at the track, I parked the car, and there was an Italian guy telling everyone where to park, and then I just reversed in. I opened the door, and he said, "Oh, you park better than a man." And I thought, like, yeah, thank you for that. And I was really like, yeah, of course I do. I park better than a man, you know, thanks. And then when I walked up to the paddock with my colleague, he said, "Hey, Wendy, that was really sexist." And I said, "Oh," but I didn't feel like that at the time, because I felt it like a genuine compliment. It is just, I think, yeah, I think also about your own positive attitude, maybe. Not that I'm saying that if something happens that you just have to let it go. Of course not. You always have to speak up. But it is just, he saw it differently and I saw it as a positive thing. And it didn't bother me at the time when it happened. I thought it was quite funny. I thought like, oh yeah, I do park better than a man.
You're just taking the compliment.
Exactly, bring it on. So yeah, that was one of the things that happened to me. And then afterwards you start thinking about it a little bit, but yeah, you know, these things happen. I don't see it as an offense or anything.
Yeah, these things do happen. And I think that the more we talk about it and the more we hold sessions like this and we do other things to actively promote diversity within the sport, the less we'll have of silly behavior, like some of the things you've mentioned, and the more inclusive and welcoming the environment will feel like. So we're well on the way to that, or at least I like to believe that we are. We have a few minutes left, but we have a lot of questions. So I just wanted to check whether you guys are happy to stay on for 5-10 minutes more. And so that I can run through some of these questions that we've had. Is that okay?
Yep,
absolutely.
No,
bring it on.
I haven't been ignoring the chat. I can see all the questions, guys. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get through as many as I can in these last few minutes. Of course, anyone that needs to drop off, thank you very much for joining us, and make sure to tune in to the other sessions that we have this week. There will be a survey going out. I've said it before and I will say it again. There will be a survey going out after these sessions finish at the end of the series, and we would love your feedback. Please give us your feedback so that we can know whether you've enjoyed these sessions, whether you want to see more of it, and then we can hopefully make something else happen in the future. And be sure to follow Motorsport UK, FIA Girls on Track UK, and of course Formula One on the social channels. And I'm sure some links will come into the chat soon with all of the information that you can click there. But now we're going to go back to the questions and try and get through as many as we can, because I don't want to leave them all unanswered. So we will start with Maria, who has asked, how did you manage, or how do you manage those levels of stress that you spoke about earlier when you're talking about getting everything ready and making sure everything's in place, and even in your day-to-day job when you're trying to make sure everything fits exactly how it should? How do you manage that stress, even though you know it will come together at the end? In the moment, what do you do to manage that stress?
Wendy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, fine, no problem. It depends really. A little bit of time management for myself. Try to keep my schedule empty for an hour or 2 hours during the day. Also to make sure that I'm, for example, focused for 1 hour on a specific task that I need to do. Helps me. So I block my schedule. So no one can add some meetings in, or well, they can, but then I just decline them. I try to speak to my team as well, because I simply can't be at every meeting, because then I have 12 in a day. So I'll just choose my battles. And when it comes to it, it's a very, like I said earlier, but I think that is not because I'm in Formula One. It is happening for everyone right now who's working from home, that there is it's a very thin line between working, being at home, and not working, being at home, and not being able to go to see friends or go out to a restaurant or whatever, and just be away from what is your working place. So I just, sometimes it can be a very simple thing. Put the music on and just turn it very loud for 3 minutes. It's, for me, sometimes enough to just get myself out of work, think about something else. I go and make myself a lovely coffee, or a good cup of tea. Just take a few minutes to sit down, and then I'm recharged. I can go again. Stress has always been a part of my life. I don't know differently. And especially in the spring, summer, when I have the time, I love to go on a bike ride, or a walk. Well, walks are not so popular anymore now, but a bike ride, or I love to play a round of golf. A round of golf is actually perfect, because the only thing I can think about is that little white ball, and I just have to whack it as far as I can. If I think about work stuff, I don't hit it. and I'm very frustrated with myself. So I just forget about all the rest, go out there, be outside for a few hours, and then I'm recharged basically. So that's how I try to do it.
Amy, anything to add? What do you do to de-stress in those moments?
When I'm away, or sort of before I go away, I just have to make sure I'm organized. I have to make sure I know exactly everything that's happening, so I can get it straight in my head. So I know that when I get to the track for the first time on a Thursday, which is our busiest day, that I know exactly, you know, what I'm doing. I feel like I have to be organized, and as a producer you have to be organized anyway. So that kind of helps me. I sort of feel like I'm then in control, and then when I'm at home, like I said, my life is very different when I'm at home. I've got 3 chickens, I've got an allotment, so I grow vegetables, I like baking, obviously I'm, you know, with my son, and I like running, so that's really good for de-stressing. And for the first time actually last season, in all of the years that I've done Formula One, I've never run the track. I just always shied away from it. Just running for me was always a personal thing, just doing it at home. And I was persuaded to run the track in Bahrain, and I have to say it really helped, because Bahrain was, you know, quite a stressful event, the first one in particular, with Romain Grosjean's crash, and so it was a really good way to sort of let off a little bit of steam and a bit of the adrenaline that we sort of felt trying to keep everything going during that. But yeah, like Wendy says, it is always stressful. You just have to make sure that you find time to sort of chill out, and wine helps tremendously. I find it helps a lot. Yeah,
I agree with that.
Not at the track. I'm just making that clear. Just
like
out
around that
work. Yeah.
We've had a question from Katie now, who has said, where would you recommend we look for roles when they open up? Is it places like LinkedIn? Because she says that she's never really seen any producer roles advertised specifically. So where can she find these sorts of job vacancies?
I think Wendy's probably best placed to answer this, because I'm a bit rubbish on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think it should be LinkedIn. This is how I found the job role that opened up. If you're looking for more, there are more websites that are working into production and broadcasting. Grapevine Jobs, for example, is one of them, where you can look for a job role in production. So I think Stepstone as well. There are a few out there, specifically for Formula One advertisers, their jobs that become available on LinkedIn. So follow F1 on LinkedIn and you will see what comes up.
There you have it. So LinkedIn is the place to check for the jobs that F1 themselves are advertising. We had a question from Anna earlier today, which is quite an interesting one, actually. She's asked, how do you keep getting new ideas for the content that you're producing? How do you make sure that it's still engaging, make sure that it's fresh, that it's relevant? What goes into that? Amy, you're grinning.
Yeah, I know. It's like, oh God, it's hard. It really is hard. You have to make sure that you do stuff that either hasn't been done before, or you have a different take on it, really. And this last year has been particularly hard with all of the restrictions, as I've said, and we normally do sort of quite fun stuff at the end of the year that we sort of shoot in Abu Dhabi. So 2 years ago we did Secret Santa, which was really good fun, and just things like that. Some ideas come from the teams themselves. They might have an event that they're putting on that they want us to sort of help facilitate and create a piece out of. And basically just good old-fashioned brainstorming. Just, you know, we're a team. It's not just you on your own. So we have meetings and we try and come up with things. The problem is coming up with enough things, and coming up with things that teams will agree to as well. That's the thing, and that drivers will agree to. That's often the hardest thing, just making sure that you pitch it just right. So yeah, it's a collaborative effort, I would say. But obviously if inspiration strikes, then you're lucky. You get a good idea.
Wendy, do you have anything to add to that?
Ideas can come from very small things sometimes. I do agree with Amy. It is often brainstorming. So one person pops in an idea, and then someone else takes it away, and we talk about things, and then we come to something. It's also not, because the funny thing is, when I joined, I had quite a few ideas, and I didn't know that some of the ideas were already 3 or 4 years old. But that doesn't mean that 3 or 4 years ago it was not possible to do. Technical restrictions, for example, that we can't do it now because we improve technically as well. So we can do all these little things. For example, the visor with Hamilton is one of the things that one person in my team had the idea. We talked about that, we talked it through, we thought it was a great idea to do, and then we started producing that. The picture-in-picture on the left-hand side bar, for example, was another one. We struggle with Formula One, we struggle with picture-in-picture, and we also struggle with slow motions. Because, for example, if you have football match, even if you do a big match and you have 20 cameras, which is not often the case, it's less. But anyways, that the ball is sometimes just not in play. You have enough time to run a slow motion. But in Formula One, they're all in play all the time. And it's not only the fight in the front or in the back, but it's in the middle, people going into the pit lane. There's always something happening. So that window to find where to drop that slow motion of, for example, starting replays, it is incredibly hard. But then all these little things, we just talk about these things. Should we do cameras differently? Should we do a different angle? Okay, but if we change this camera position on this curve, on this turn, what is the effect for the incoming shot, and what is the effect on the outgoing shot? What do we miss? Do we hit something on the back what that we don't want to see? All these things. And also, I think lots of ideas come with the development of different broadcast techniques. Artificial intelligence, for example, machine learning techniques when it comes to graphics, for example. We do run these AWS graphics. It's really high-tech machine learning. So basically the computer learns about how cars develop or how cars perform against others, or how drivers do that. So it's all these little things, they just bring ideas, and we just put it in a bucket together and we talk about things.
Yeah, there's lots of different bits to consider there. And I know that when I visited, I was actually amazed by how quickly you guys turn around some of the ideas. I remember at one point I was sitting there and somebody in the team had suggested something, and then within a few laps you'd managed to pull it out of the bag and put it up on the feed. And I was like, wow, that is very efficient. I mean, of course, I'm sure it's not like that all the time, but it was very impressive to see, I must say. Yeah. Now I'm going to do a couple more questions and then I'm going to wrap things up. So one of the questions that we've had, and I've seen a couple of people ask it, is how important is it to know other languages? Sophie asked it earlier. Is it important as in your roles as producers to have other languages, or is it something that you can sort of get around?
I'm very ashamed to admit that I do not speak another language in all of the time that I have learned. I've worked in Formula One, and it is a sadness of mine. And I do keep saying that I'm going to learn one. We're obviously very lucky that Formula One is an international sport and that everybody speaks English beautifully. So yes, and of course, Wendy, you are of multiple languages, aren't you? I'm sure.
Yeah.
I do speak multiple languages.
Has it helped you in your role?
Not well. English is I speak English most of the time, and sometimes I just throw in some Flemish or Dutch words, trying to keep my people, on their toes. I speak French and a bit of Spanish, but in Formula One, I think English is the main language, to be honest. So I do send to every one of my team a personal birthday message in Dutch.
Oh,
they need to yeah, they need to figure out what I'm saying. And I get the funniest things back, to be honest. It's quite a long text that I send, different for everyone. And I always end Google Translate is your best friend. And then I'll get the funniest things back in Dutch most of the time. So it's it's fun.
That's a nice little touch. Right, last question before we wrap things up. I can see so many thank yous coming in, by the way. People really enjoyed the session and they're thanking you guys. Lots of different messages. But final question, very quickly, what are you both most looking forward to this season? Wendy?
The start, well, racing again. I would love, I hope that we are going to be, even if it's going to be a very difficult season for everyone again, unfortunately, but I do hope we can pull it off again as a team, as a company, for the sport, for the drivers, for the viewers. So for me, I think that's the biggest and the main goal for now is get that season going.
Yeah.
And just build a great year from or a great racing season, really.
Amy, what are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think last year was so tough for everybody and it was so intense, and we sort of somehow managed to pull it off, and that was a great sense of achievement. So more of the same, obviously new drivers going to, sort of different teams, that sort of thing. But mainly, from a personal point of view, I'm looking forward to seeing all my friends again. Because you do make lots of friends in this sport, and especially if you've been doing it a long time like I have, and that's what makes the job sort of really enjoyable, I think, when you're sort of seeing people and meeting people. So
that's really lovely. I have just had another question come in that I've been told to ask as a quick final question. Okay. Who are your favorite drivers or teams?
Amy.
Quite easy. Daniel Ricciardo, every time. He is gold. He is gold. Whatever you throw at him, he will perform. He will step up. And Daniel Ricciardo on a bad day is still better than some of the other drivers on an excellent day. So even if he's hurting and having a terrible time, he will still give you what you want and be kind of empathetic to what it is that you're trying to do. So yeah, I'll stick with Ricciardo.
Wendy?
That is such a tricky question.
But I still asked it and I want an answer.
I know, Ariana. Why is this a tricky question? When I was a kid, I was never a big fan of one person.
Yeah.
I was always a fan of the underdog, maybe. I don't know what it was. But so for example, when it comes to history and all the historic things, I think Ferrari is an amazing team.
Yeah.
But it's not my favorite team. I think right now, I have to say, he will kill me if I don't say it, but I'm a fan of Max Verstappen. Because of he's a pain in the ass. I know him. Sometimes you just can't stand him. And he's a son of his dad. It's normal. But he is brave and he tries to do different things, and he's not always political, which I don't say that he's always right. He didn't say that, because sometimes I really disagree on how he brings things in the media or how he does things. But he did some amazing racing, and that's why I like him.
Okay, I'm glad that we got an answer from you there. I know that I had to push you a bit there, but you've got lots of people agreeing with you in the chat, so it's fun.
Well,
that is it. Now, I'm sorry for keeping you a little bit longer, but we had so many questions and so many people were loving it that I couldn't stop. But thank you so much for your time this evening, Wendy and Amy. Thank you everyone who has joined in, who has put messages in the chat. So many messages, and we really appreciate all the engagement. As I said earlier, there will be a survey coming out after this series ends. Please complete it. And all of the videos will be posted on the Motorsport UK YouTube page and on the FIA Girls on Track Facebook page. Links are there. Make sure you join FIA Girls on Track UK Facebook page. Again, I'm really trying to drill that in. And thank you so much for joining us. And we will be back for our last few sessions tomorrow and Wednesday, I think is the last one. So be sure to join us again. But thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Wendy and Amy, again. And hopefully I'll see you guys sometime soon, hopefully hosting something else. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.